Good morning and welcome to Backyard and Beyond. Well, yesterday we talked about chocolate kisses, and today we're going to talk about M&Ms. Do you cook with M&Ms, or you just eat them out of hand, or are you going, M&Ms, they're never on my grocery list? If you have kids, I'm guessing they are, even if they may not be a favorite of yours. But M&Ms, very interesting story. You know, I look at those M&Ms on the top of my little cookies I made, and I went, when did M&Ms come about? I don't remember eating M&Ms as a kid, and actually they've been around longer almost than I have. But let's start out with some interesting facts about America's favorite candies, M&Ms. Supposedly, Forrest Mars, and it is the Mars company that makes M&Ms, came up with the idea during the Spanish Civil War. He discovered that soldiers were looking for a taste of home in the form of chocolate, but he needed something that could withstand hot temperatures. So he took this request as a challenge and eventually came up with the candy, which was packaged in heavy tubes. And soldiers today still love M&Ms. Now, a little twist on this story that says, he came up with the idea after seeing a need. Supposedly there was another manufacturer making something similar with that hard candy coating, and that's where he got the idea. But whatever, both of them agree that it did start during the Spanish Civil War. Fact number 2, the brown bag of regular M&Ms was developed in 1948 and didn't change much over the years until 2003. Fact number 3, peanut M&Ms, those were an addition, all in the color brown, weren't developed until 1954. Another fact, M&M's slogan, you know what that is, the milk chocolate melts in your mouth and not in your hand, is one of the most recognizable in advertising history. And another fact, red, green, and yellow colors were added to peanut M&Ms in 1960, but orange didn't happen until 1976. Now, do you remember in the mid-70s, red M&Ms were discontinued because of concerns that the red food coloring was causing cancer. In 1981, astronauts chose the round candy-coated chocolates to go with them into space as part of their food rations. And another fact, a holiday blend of special colored M&Ms were developed in the early 80s. And, of course, the first blend was the red and green ones for Christmas. And since then, a pastel mix has been developed for Easter and another line added for Valentine's Day. And even more recently, like I think just this fall, although, sometimes the Midwest we're a year or so behind. But I think this was just brand new because they advertised them. And those were the fall colors, 4 fall colors that were gorgeous. And you could even use them for decorating. Fact number 9, red M&Ms were brought back in 1987. And fact number 10, in the 1990s, 2 new flavors were developed, peanut butter chocolate and almond. And then, do you remember being asked to vote to which colors should be added to M&Ms? Consumers were asked to choose a new color. Pink and purple were considered, but it was blue that took home the prize to take its place in M&M history. Well, as we mentioned, M&Ms started long ago, not a very recent happening, but the Mars Incorporated, and we'll talk a little bit about how the Mars Incorporated company came along, is international. And we may not know, I did not know, that a couple of things besides M&M, Snickers, Milky Way, some of those kinds of things, they also make Whiskas, pet food, and Uncle Ben's rice. And as we mentioned, much of their product has been sold in the United Kingdom, but it really did still start in the United States. Frank C. Mars, the originator, was born in Minnesota in 1884 and suffered from polio, so he was unable to walk. So Frank's mother, who enjoyed making candy, kept him entertained by allowing him to hand dip chocolates. At age 19, Frank started a candy business and married Ethel G. And they had a son, Forrest Edward Mars. Now, both of those, the marriage and the son, didn't work out very well in terms of the marriage and the business. So then Frank married Ethel V. Healy. Both of his wives' first names were Ethel. Now, that's significant because they also at one time, and still exist, a specialty, high-end, much more expensive chocolate, and the name is Ethel M. Now, that first caught my attention because Ethel was my mom's name, so I had to check them out. I've never bought too many because they're not available very locally, and they are quite expensive, but very delicious. If you like chocolate, they're great. The company, back to the company, they started in Tacoma, Washington, and sold candy to 5 and 10 cent stores along the Pacific Coast, but because there was no refrigeration, they had to deliver the candy on the same day. So they were a busy company making the candy and delivering it on the same day. Then they moved to Minneapolis, and it was called the Nougat House. That was in 1920, and they changed their name to Mar-O-Bar. So for a while, that Mars company that we know now, Mars Incorporated, was called Mar-O-Bar. And one of their big successes during this time was developing the Milky Way candy bar. And it actually was developed because of the bar that they had created couldn't withstand transportation. So, it's interesting how sometimes a failure leads to a great success. At this point, 1923, the annual sales increased from $100,000 to $793,000. That's big bucks in 1923. Well, then they moved to Chicago, and the main reason was for the railway system so they could distribute their candies, and they developed a new candy bar, the Snickers. Now, Frank's son, remember we said he was not really very successful in getting into the family business, but his dad, the originator, gave Forrest the formula for Milky Way and $50,000 to start his own candy company because they couldn't get along. And it's sort of interesting about this family is that they're pretty private. You're not going to see the Mars family at this time out there in the public. They don't want photos. They're a very private family, and sort of private about the way they hold their company. So it's one of those companies that have been very successful, but also very private. As we mentioned, the company is international. At one time, they were two separate companies, and now they have formed to be just one company, no matter where the company sells their candy. As we mentioned earlier today, M&M's became popular with the soldiers because it would withstand warm temperatures. Remember that. It won't melt in your hand logo. Mars has stepped into the main meal business in the 40s with the varieties of rice that we mentioned and a new technique called parboiling. So Mars rice was a staple to the U.S. Army during World War II. And after the war, the rice company began, Uncle Ben's Incorporated, and became the top-selling rice in the United States and then worldwide. So, ongoing with this company, it'll be interesting to see what goes next with M&M's. There's always something happening because we as consumers demand something happening. Otherwise, we sort of forget a product. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens next with our little candy M&Ms. Until next time, from Oscar Hammerstein, the famous musician, wrote, "A bell is not rung until you ring it. A song is not sung until you sing it. Love in our heart is put there to stay, but love is not love until you give it away."